Hello, loves. I am so excited to be here with you today on the 22nd of July, which is the Mary Magdalene feast day. And we are going today to explore a little bit more about Mary Magdalene. We're going to look at her from an esoteric, from a spiritual perspective. But I'm also somebody who really loves, my science. And so I'm going to go into like more historical facts around her and around what was happening in her time, Jesus, the whole geopolitical, context. And then we will also look a little bit at the sacred sites around France that are, in veneration of Mary Magdalene, because out of all the countries in the world, France is probably the number one country that is, still venerating and holding all those spaces of Mary Magdalene, memories of Mary Magdalene. And so before we begin, I would love to invite you to, if you're watching this on replay, to just put a little pause and ask yourself the question of, why do you feel called to join this workshop? What is it about Mary Magdalene that is, calling you, that is inviting you to, follow her path, learn more about her? And, for me personally, I truly believe that Mary Magdalene, her energy, her archetype is calling a very specific lineage of women and men as well at this specific time. It is often women who are in some way connected to the Christic energy. And it really is about, remembering the sacred feminine and bringing back the balance of the masculine and the feminine, also within this Christic energy and everywhere. And, it's women who are somehow deeply connected to that lineage of the priestesses of the rose. And so I would love to, invite you on this quest for yourself to just take a moment and stop and ask yourself, why are you feeling called to, go deeper with her? What is it about her that is calling you right now? What is it maybe on your path that is calling to be, opened and blossom more and explored more at this specific time of your life and in your path? So just take a moment to, dive deeper into this and really reflect on that and feel into this. Okay, and so as we begin today, I would love to start and open this with a little passage that I'm going to read from the Sophia Code, which is an awesome book by Kaira. And if you haven't read it, please do read it. I feel like the Sophia Code for me is like the 101 of divine feminine. Really, it's the author channeled a lot of, goddesses and feminine deities and avatars and ascended masters of the feminine. And I think for me, at least, her description of Mary Magdalene was the description of Mary Magdalene that the most resonated for me. And I'm not going to read everything, but I'm going to read a few passages that I think will help you and help us today to co-create and to really create like a framework of who I think Mary Magdalene was, okay? And obviously this is channeled, so no, there is no concrete proof that this is exactly how she was or who she was. But this is a beautiful invitation to also connect to your own intuition and feel into this and see if that resonates with you, because this is, what any faith and any religion is actually based on. It's a lot on, our own interpretation and our own faith. And hi, Elizabeth. And so this is what we're going to do. So I would love to read a little passage from Sophia Code about Mary Magdalene today. And this is what I was just saying, is that this is what resonates for me the most around Mary Magdalene and her energy. And so it says, I am Mary Magdalene, known as she of 1,000 angels. I work with every order of angelic guides to reconcile the suffering of the world, of this world and others. Whenever I am evoked as an overlighting presence, I am joined by 1 billion of accompanying angels. My divine feminine Christ embodiment rocked the ancient world in which I served. My mother was a wise woman who privately maintained the worship of the divine feminine according to the lineage of her grandmothers. As a young child, my parents recognized that I was innately gifted for the channeling and healing arts, coupled with a sharp intelligence that I wielded as a sword of truth. I was born as an awakened being with a psychic development of many lifetimes already activated within my body. Although I was uniquely raised with wealth, status, and a secret education that honored the divine feminine, the first part of my life was spent cloistered far away from interacting with most people in any public spaces. A female of any age, especially a young woman, courageous enough to assert her boundaries, would be harmed or legally stoned to death for any random projection placed upon her by an angry man. My parents encouraged me to cultivate strong inner practices of meditation and self-mastery before regularly interacting with the insane civilization that I was born to liberate. The wealth of my family afforded me options available to and not available to most young girls of my time. Along with the extensive home studies led by my mother, I traveled each year with my father to secretly train at mystery school temples in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India. My heart ached as I would witness the brutal suffering most of my people were surviving, both from Roman occupation as well as from the self-righteous Pharisees of our own people's ruling. And this is something we're going to look deeper into when I talk a little bit more about the geopolitical context of the time. But as well as, there would be many times that I would physically feel my throat close up as I empathetically felt yet another woman being raped and beaten into submission or even killed. The Roman methods of public torture for population control would enrage me behind my clustered walls. My mother knew the agony of my true feelings for this was an undeniable anger for her as well. She directed my heart to continually take refuge in my secret practices with Sekhmet, Kalima, Inanna, and wrathful aspect of the Green Tarot to cast out the darkness and invoke clearings, healing, and reconciliation for those I prayed for. As my mother would watch me pray, a great light would go out from my body and join the angelic ranks that I would invoke for the healing of others. As I grew into a beautiful young woman of marriageable age, I was afforded another extremely rare opportunity due to the wealth of my family. I was given the right to inherit my mother's fortune passed through her grandmother's lineage, as well as the right to choose if marriage was appropriate for me. I happily opted out of a young marriage and chose to continue my mystery school trainings. I often spent as much time as I was permitted to directly mentor with Mother Mary as my primary teacher, for we shared a similar background in our Egyptian mystery school trainings. We would often sit together in her rose garden. Mary would remind me that I was whole rose in the presence of both my petals and thorns, and never feel ashamed of my thorns. Deciding who Jesus was for myself was an important part in opening my heart to follow his lead and to take up my opportunity to teach by his side. I was a wealthy, independent woman with an extraordinary education, and I did not have to answer this call to embody the divine feminine Christ as a supporting teacher in his movement. I needed to intuitively feel the experience of his own embodiment of both the divine masculine and divine feminine Christ energies, to trust that serving in alignment with his ministry was best use of my own gifts and life force. I met Jesus in person at a wedding that Mother Mary had asked me to attend with her. Our shared resonance felt extraordinary, and I could feel in my heart how easy it would be to reach the people that I wanted to serve as I chose to work by his side. I never felt that I was beneath him or in servitude to Jesus in any way. His integrity was immaculate, and his devoted acts for reconciling the divine feminine went above and beyond every day. Our spiritual alliance encoded humanity's collective consciousness with a true template for the reconciliation of the divine masculine and divine feminine Christ energies. Our constant focus upon service and uninterrupted work revealed the power of how men and women can access their divinity together, rising above base cultural survival strategies to serve a mighty good in wholeness and integrity with one another. We were both so filled by the Holy Spirit pouring through us that our daily experience of working with one another created a blueprint for a future golden age that is upon you now. Following Jesus' ascension, Mother Mary and I fled to France. Channeling in the refuge of caves, I prophesied that my name would be maligned and hidden for the entire Dark Age. I also witnessed that my reputation would not be restored until thousands of years later, when the voices of women ushering in a new golden age would reach into their cellular memories and remember the truth of my divine feminine Christ embodiment. Yes, I was seeing you as one of those future light workers that would call out to receive my support as an ascended master mentor for this next golden age. I saw the faces of countless women and men who would remember my work as a divine feminine Christ embodiment and seek me by name as an essential spiritual guide for current spiritual revolution that is upon you. Now, thank you for seeing me as I am, which follows for me to support you in your own great mission ahead. And so I found that this was such a beautiful passage, and I really feel like, to me personally, it really resonates with, what the Magdalenian lineage, what the Magdalenian energy is all about. And I feel it's a lot about bringing back the polarities, bringing back the sacred feminine into the Christic energy, right? And, in the universe, there is always those two principles. There is always the sacred masculine, there is always the sacred feminine. There was the Isis and Osiris, like in all ancient myths and traditions and mystery schools and religions, there was always both of those principles. And it's only mostly with like the rise of the monotheistic religions, with the patriarchy, that it became mainly focused on the masculine principle, which in itself is not bad. Like, there is nothing wrong with the masculine principle. It can be a very beautiful energy. However, it does create a big imbalance when it is misused and when we lose the feminine principle, because I really believe they're supposed to work together. And I think this is what Mary Magdalene really embodies and really evokes and really invites us to reconnect with, is to bring back our own sacred feminine, reconnect back to our own sacred feminine. And so if ever Jesus ever had a bride, it would definitely be Mary Magdalene. I really think she is the lost bride of Jesus. She's the lost bride of Christianity. She's the lost bride of the whole Christic energy. And for millennia, it was repressed, especially by the Roman Catholic Church, and who was operating, like, it was suppressed on purpose, right? It was operating for money, for control, for power, and it was mainly men who was in power there. So definitely women had no place. And I would love to go a little bit more actually to explain to you what we know about her now, where do our texts come from, and to understand the whole context of her life, like what was happening in the world historically around her time. Because I think if you want to understand somebody, or understand ancient texts, or understand anything that we transmitted our history, it's really important not to just have the text. It's also really important to have the context, right? Because in the world, context is context. Con is with. So what comes with the text, what surrounds the text, right? And so if we don't have the text, the context, we might not necessarily understand the text. And so what first I would love to invite you to do is to see, like, okay, let's see historically, where do we get, all of our information about Mary Magdalene and about Jesus, because we can't talk about Mary Magdalene without talking about Jesus. They really go hand in hand. And so most of everything that we have so far comes from the Bible. Right. And the Bible itself, we very often might think or have this idea that the Bible was written in one shot and this is what we've got. This is actually not true. The Bible itself is comprised of many texts, of many gospels that were written at different times. So they were not even all written at the same time. And none of them was actually written at the exact time of Jesus's life. Some were written a bit before, some were written a bit after. I think the earliest was probably around something roughly 50, 60 years after him. Then later on were in 130, 200 years after his life. And so none of them directly are, written at the same time as him. And so a lot of them are actually based on oral traditions, on sayings. So you really see how some information may have been lost in translation, right? And then we also need to understand that the texts that actually went into the Bible that are, considered canonical texts, they were highly curated. They were voted for again and again and again by councils of men who came together. One of the famous one, it was the Council of Nicaea, and that was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 330s, early 300s. But there were meetings before and after, and they were voting which texts should be part of the Bible, which texts should not be part of the Bible. And this was done by the Roman Catholic Church. And so you need to understand also that, like, at the setting historically, there wasn't just one Christianity or one view of Christianity. There were hundreds of sects, of cults, of Christianity, of Jesus, who were transmitting his teachings, and they were all very different. They varied greatly, and not all of them agreed. And even each one of his disciples went and they had like their own, let's say, like following after his crucifixion. And so one of them was Peter. And Peter was, the Roman Catholic Church is actually based a lot on the teachings of Peter. He was like the forefather, if you want. And it's actually, we have some recordings that Peter and Mary Magdalene did not like each other. There was feuds between them. There were fights between them, and he highly disliked her. And so if we think that, like, okay, the teachings of Roman Catholic Church, which is kind of like the forefathers of what we know right now, what constitute the Bible, were based on the teachings of Peter. And Peter himself, he did not like Mary Magdalene. He did not agree with a woman being in a position of power. We can see how the texts that went into the Bible were then skewed to really eradicate any traces of her and to diminish her and to really not show the actual power that she held and the position and the authority that she held at her time. But we're going to look more into this. And so a lot of the texts were very curated. They were curated to please a Roman audience. And so that's also important to notice. And so the Roman Church, they went out of their way to eradicate anything that would not support their agenda. And their agenda was that there is God, there is the Roman Church, and then there is the people, and they're the necessary intermediary between them, right? And so anything that would even remotely threaten that was eradicated, burned, killed, you name it. And miraculously, what is amazing is that there were texts that survived that were hidden, purposefully hidden, so that we can have at least some trace, like in hopes of having some traces of another version, that the version of the Roman Church that would survive, that would show us a different story, right? And so the most known texts are the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library, which was found in Egypt. And that was really recently that we found them. It was, I think it was in the 40s and the 60s. So really not that long ago. And those texts, they hold the codices and gospels and, a lot of texts that are actually contemporary to the gospels that went into the Bible, but they tell a whole different story. And there's some specific ones like the Gospel of Philip, of Matthew, and of Philip, of Matthew, and of Mary Magdalene, actually, that obviously didn't make it to the official Bible story, but are very, very, very powerful and give us a lot of insights of what Jesus' life might have been like and who was Mary Magdalene, right? And so I would love to also give you a little bit of a geopolitical context for what was going on around the time so that we understand, okay, we know where our historical source of information is coming from, but what was going on in the world around that time, right? Like what was actually the whole context of when Jesus and Mary Magdalene's story was unfolding. And so we first need to understand that there was a Roman rule in Palestine. So in 63 BC, the Roman general of Pompey, he captured Jerusalem, and they effectively brought it under the Roman reign. However, they also allowed some kind of, autonomy to the Jewish population, as long as they complied with paying taxes and, made sure that they still can practice their religions, but they need to pay taxes and still be, report to Rome. Then they also installed puppet king, and that was kind of the Herodian dynasty, if you want. So they installed a puppet king, Herod, at that time, and he was ruling during the birth of Jesus, and he is known for like a lot of building projects and things like that. But he is especially known for being highly cruel and highly paranoid. And at that time, there was also this, he heard rumors that there will be a king of Jews from the descendants of David that will come and outthrone him and unite all Jews. And so he was very paranoid, and he wanted to kill all the little babies that were born at the time. And this is how, we heard the story of Jesus, who went into, like, their family went hiding because he will be killed. This is actually based on like historical facts. There really was this puppet king, Herod, at around that time, that was installed by the Romans. And so also, like, if you look at the Jewish religion at the time, there was not, a unanimous one Jewish religion. There were many different sects. So there was, in the whole population of Judea and Galilee, there was different, sects and subsections of the Jewish faith. So there was like the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Zealots, and they all had different interpretations of, the Jewish law and Jewish traditions. And so the Zealots, there was actually a Zealot uprising at the time. So you need to understand that it wasn't like a calm time, that is peaceful, and Jesus was just walking around teaching about love. This is not exactly what was happening. There was the Zealots, who were a militant Jewish group that was opposed to the Roman rule, and they were creating and advocating for armed resistances. And so there was a lot of movements, there were a lot of uprisings happening against the Romans, and that eventually did lead to a Jewish-Roman war. I think it was, let me check my notes, around 66 to 73 CE, so like right after, probably Jesus' death. And that resulted in the destruction of the Second Temple of Jerusalem in the 70 CE. And at the aftermath of that was a great exodus of Jews, because there was a lot of brutality between the Romans and the Jews in that area. And so when we think about it, there was great political instability. There were uprisings. The king that was in power, he was paranoid. And so it was not like a fun and calm time around that. To add to this, the Jews at the time, they really had, messianic expectations. So it was very common for them. It was really part of their faith to, await a Messiah, await, a leader that will come and deliver them from like the foreign rule of the Romans and restore the glory of Israel. So this was part of something that was present in the collective consciousness of the Jews around that time, and that's why like it also contributed to the reception of Jesus as the Messiah, as that Messiah that will come and deliver them. But he was also not the only one at the time who claimed to be a Messiah. There were other ones. I'm just putting this, to give you an idea. And if we talk again about like the Romans, so the Romans were generally tolerant of other faiths. And you need to understand, because, when you think about that, the Roman Empire was so big and so vast, and they conquered so many territories with people from different religions, that if they would try to convert everyone, they would probably lose a lot of territory due to uprisings. And so for that purposes, because they wanted to be there and collect money for taxes, they had to be very tolerant and lenient with other territories, including Palestine. And so they were very tolerant. However, sometimes it clashed, because for the Romans, they had something that was called the imperial cult. And at that time, they would instill the Roman emperor as a deity. So, in our time, this feels like very strange, because we don't deify our, presidents or prime ministers. However, in that time, it was very common to deify the emperors. It was like very common practice. And in fact, the Emperor Augustus, who died at like around 14 AD. And then the following, there was also the Emperor, let me see what his name was. I forgot. There was Augustus, who was until 14. He was actually the adoptive son of Julius Caesar. And then there was, anyways, they'll come back to me. So they were all deified after their death, and they were given the title of Divi Filius, which is son of the divine. And Julius Caesar was also deified after his death, Augustus as well. And so it's just to give you an idea that like the act of deifying somebody was actually very present. And Augustus himself, he had very good, like, political skills and, if you want, PR skills. And so the act of deifying the emperor was a religious system of veneration that, like, it really helped them create more power, solidifying the loyalty of the people who support them, who support the Roman state, who support the Roman emperor. And so the imperial cult of like deifying their emperors was something that was integral part of the Roman religious and political landscape. And so it's important to understand, because even if for us it feels very foreign, this was not something new. And I'm not saying that Jesus was not really a god or not. I think this is really a question of faith, but I do think it's important to understand the context. And so later on, when the Roman Church wanted to, present an alternative version or idea of religion and to like kind of solidify their version of Christianity, it might make sense politically and religiously and for power purposes that they would have to deify Jesus. I'm just saying, it's up to everyone to then go back to their own faith and see if it's something that they believe that he really was a god or not. Like, I'm not debating at all any of that, but I think it was important to consider for the whole context to understand what's happening. And so that being in place, then imagine that, Jesus himself, who was Jesus? Jesus himself, he was actually a descendant of King. He was a royal blood. He was a descendant of King David. And if you go like into the Gospel of Matthew, he goes into detail about like outlining the whole genealogy of Jesus, starting from, Abraham all the way to King David, and then all the way to Joseph, who was Jesus' father. So Jesus was actually a royal blood. And so he would potentially have, the qualifications that were needed to, unite all the Jews and be the, contender for like Herod's throne. So Herod was not wrong to be fearful of them. And when you think like the whole political instability, you can understand how this whole picture formed of him becoming like the Messiah and becoming the awaited one. Okay, so what else do we know about Jesus? So Jesus was probably from the Essene sect. And Elizabeth, my love, if I can ask you just to mute your cam, if you don't mind, just so that we don't hear the background noises too. Thank you, love. And so Jesus was probably from the Essene sect, and there is many historical pinpoints showing why he was from the Essene. And it is Essene sect of Jewish. If you want, they were like more kind of a bit the mystical side of Jewish. They were the Gnostics. They did a lot of mystery school teachings, and a lot of teachings that Jesus was, spreading and transmitting were actually based on Essene teachings and mystery school trainings. And, sometimes we can think that like, okay, Jesus's message was like so original and was so new. Actually, it wasn't. He received a lot of his teachings from John the Baptist and probably from the Essenes. And actually some historical proof that might support the fact that he was maybe from the Essenes, that in all of the 4 Gospels, he is mentioned to wear white linen robes. And why this is so important is that like usually the Gospels that went into the Bible, they kind of contradict each other. They often, because they're not from the same authors, they're not from the same time, they're not even from sometimes the same century. And so very often they're like very, they don't necessarily all say the same thing. And so the fact that all 4 of them mentioned that he was wearing a white robe, we can maybe deduct from that it was important, and it was a wink that he was probably from the Essene, lineage, and that he studied at least with them. And so that points us that like probably Jesus did do a lot of mystery school teachings and ancient tradition and going into like more the esoteric traditions. And so if we look even like at Jesus himself, Messiah, right? Like what does Messiah mean, right? Messiah means the anointed one. And when you translate Messiah into Greek, it means Christ. So Christ simply means the anointed one. But the title of anointed one was very often given to kings, because kings, to become kings and to open their connection to the divine, they were very often anointed. And I will go deeper into like the art, the sacred art of anointing, and working with anointing oils a bit later on. But for example, like in the Old Testament, when the King David was anointed, he became David the Messiah, right? Or David the Christ. And after him, every subsequent king for like thousands of years who was anointed was known by the same name. So the name itself, Jesus Christ, it was not like his actual name, it was Jesus, the anointed one. And so, yeah. And so what is the connection between, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, right? And I know most of us know a lot more about Jesus than Mary Magdalene. But there's a lot of wings that perhaps they were married. Perhaps there was sacred union between them. And I know this is not something that is like mainstream in the, official Roman Catholic Church, because again, that would maybe go against his, image of being a god. Because like, what is it, like a god is married to like a common woman? That makes no sense, right? And then they wanted to demine the feminine, so then she would have to be like a common woman. But there is a lot of beliefs that they were actually married, and we'll go into some of those wings that are actually in the Old Testament and in the other Gospels we found outside of the Bible, the non-canonical ones. And also, just to say that, like in south of France, there was group of people. It was not just a small group. It was like literally the whole southwest of France. A lot of nobility and dukes, archdukes, they all converted to what was known as Catharism in like around 1100s, 1200s. And they believed that Mary Magdalene was actually married to Jesus. That was part of their belief system. And it was believed that they were following the original teachings of Mary Magdalene when she fled to France after the crucifixion of Jesus. And so obviously all of them were eradicated. There was a huge mass genocide that happened in the southwest of France, where all the Cathars were burnt and eradicated, and even killed Catholics, because they're like, oh, well, God will know their own, so let's just kill them all. And there's like entire cities. And that's how the Crusades began, actually. So that's a little like note. But because the Roman Catholic Church, again, they didn't want to have a competing story. And so because this story was spreading so fast, it was really a threat to them. So yeah, if you want to look more into the story of Cathars, it's very, very fascinating. But that to say that like there was very strong competing stories with the official Roman Catholic that like, no, Jesus was celibate or anything like that. However, there is nothing in the Bible ever that mentions Jesus advocating for celibacy in any shape or form. And so, there are, however, like little wings that maybe their union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene was something that was even planned before. By perhaps their families, or something that was somehow envisioned, and something that was like destined and meant to happen. And so one of those curious little wings, and I know this is going to sound funny, okay, but there is a gospel, it's called the Gospel of Infancy of Jesus, that dates to around like no later than 2nd century after Christ era. That says that after the circumcision of Christ, so when he was a baby, he was circumcised, and the foreskin was kept by an unknown woman in an alabaster jar that was used for holding spikenard oil, right? And it says that later on, it is the same box that Mary Magdalene used to pour the anointment with spikenard oil on Jesus. And so, I don't know. but it might suggest that, like, okay, where did she get this box? How come she got this box? Was it her mother who kept it? Was it because they already planned the marriage of those two together? It's possible. It's not something unknown back in the day to have arranged marriages. And so this is maybe just a little, innuendo and like some kind of suggestions or like proof, if you want, historically. Also, at no point in the Bible does Jesus say that, he advocates for celibacy, like I mentioned. And so sometimes if we keep in mind the whole context that, the texts that went into the Bible were highly curated and highly, a lot of things were actually cut out from them. A lot of passages were cut out for them. And maybe the passages where you won't be talking about the union of Mary Magdalene and Jesus would definitely be cut out from the text and excluded from the text. Sometimes we have to kind of read between the lines. And one of the best indicators is sometimes not what's written, it's what's not written, right? It's the silence. And so if you look at the context, in that time, it would be really highly unusual for a man not to be married. Nowhere does it say that Jesus advocates for celibacy, and nowhere that it says that he was not married. So probably if he would have been celibate, it would have been so unusual that it probably would have been written about. And the fact that it's not written about highly suggests that he probably was married. And in fact, if you want to go deeper into this, there is a lot of references to Jesus in all of the Gospels as rabbi. And from this we can deduct that he probably did undergo some very formal rabbinical trainings, official trainings. Hey, love. Some rabbinical trainings, and was officially recognized as rabbi. However, the Jewish Messianic law is very, very explicit on that, is that an unmarried man cannot be a teacher and cannot be a rabbi. Oh, there you go, I'm like coughing a little bit. He cannot be a teacher and he cannot be a rabbi. Therefore, it's very likely that he was married. And so now if we look a little bit at Mary Magdalene, who probably was his bride, and this is, I'm telling, like, for my personal belief, I am really convinced that they were together and they were embodying the sacred masculine and feminine. But I also want to, like, not just, chug out my own thing and tell you this is what I feel, but like really go into historical and like show you a little bit more the historical aspect. Hey, Beauty, do you mind putting the to mute yourself? Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Just so that we don't hear, but if you can just mute, thank you, love. So Mary Magdalene. Okay, this is really interesting. So most of us who heard about Mary Magdalene, we probably heard that she was a prostitute, and this is just so not true. There is no mention at all of Mary Magdalene at any point in any of the Gospels of her being a prostitute. It is not said anywhere literally that she's a prostitute. So the version of Mary Magdalene being a prostitute that is like held on for centuries actually came from Pope Gregory the Great in the 6th century, so like 600 years after the whole story. And he made it like in an official sermon. He said that she is a prostitute, which is not true, and it was just his own interpretation. But neither Orthodoxy or Protestantism adopted this version, and for them, they still consider Mary Magdalene as, as a saint. And so that's like really common for Catholic branch to really see Mary Magdalene as a prostitute, and it started with him, and it was solely his interpretation, and it's not based on anything else but his own view. And so when we first hear actually about Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of Luke, what is described is a woman out of whom went 7 devils. And so this is perhaps the notion where, the idea of her being a prostitute came from. Maybe he thought like 7 devils, he interpreted, because again, like think of the context, like I said, everything, like the context is so important. So in 600s, we're like close to Middle Ages, like everything is sinful, everything, there is devils, and so what would you think, a woman out of whom went 7 devils? Probably that would mean sin. And what is a sinful woman? She must be a prostitute, right? So there is no concrete evidence or saying that she was a prostitute. That was only his own interpretation. However, I would love to invite us to look at the number 7, right? 7 is such a sacred number. And everything in ancient texts is often code. And we have to really learn to uncode and read between the lines and read what it means. And so the number 7 was always a very mystical number. And it's a number that is highly associated with sacred geometry. It is a number that is often used in many different initiations of the divine. If you think even like in alchemy, it is often used. It is often used in Hermetic traditions. If you think of the 7 colors of rainbow, the 7 chakras, 7 is a very mystical number. So it's not for just like that they said 7 demons went out of her. And so according to some scholars, this phrase is actually referring to maybe a type of exorcism that was performed by Jesus, or a type of purification. It could also be some type of conversion or ritual initiation, and like I said, a lot of alchemical traditions and esoteric traditions actually do have 7 steps of purification weaved in them and initiations. Also, a very interesting part is that there is the cult of Ishtar. The mother goddess and Queen Heaven actually also have 7 stages of initiation. And so maybe prior to her affiliation with Jesus, she may have been well trained in ancient goddess mysteries and familiar with those rituals. So maybe that was one of those rituals that they were performing. Also in the Gospel of Philip, there is another interesting reference to Mary Magdalene and the bridal chamber initiations. And the bridal chamber initiations are very ancient Egyptian initiations in Egyptian mystery schools. And so the fact that those two are associated, and the way it described that she knows about the bridal chamber, really does, we can probably conclude from that she was familiar with that. She was familiar with ancient Isis mystery schools and ancient Egyptian mystery schools. And that goes a little bit hand in hand with the passage that I read to you from the Sophia Code, that Mary Magdalene was highly trained in ancient mystery schools and in the divine feminine practices. The most prominent feature of Mary Magdalene, like the thing that we think of about most, besides the false idea of her being a prostitute, is her anointing Jesus, right? And so what does that tell us about Mary Magdalene? So Mary Magdalene, first of all, she was probably very, very wealthy. The amount of spikenard oil that she poured on Jesus for this anointment would have probably cost like tens of thousands of dollars today. So somebody who does not have means would probably not be able to procure that amount of spikenard oil and then just like anoint someone, okay? Also, Luke reports that her friends included the wife of a high dignitary of Herod's court, and that her and various other women support Jesus and his disciples with various material resources. So again, this is a woman who has a lot of financial means, and she's probably coming from a highly wealthy family, and she's probably very highly educated. And the fact that she had access to different mystery schools, she was probably traveling, and again, from a highly educated, wealthy family. And so that goes again hand in hand with like the little description I read you about Mary Magdalene at the beginning. Okay. I would love to return back a little bit to, the anointing and spikenard oil. And, the anointing of Jesus is unanimously mentioned in all of the Gospels. And again, like I said, because some of the Gospels don't agree with each other, they were written at different times, this is something that is very rare that all of them speak about that. So that tells us that that was probably an act of, very high importance. And if we look at, the fact that Messiah, Christ, means the anointed one, And it's with the act of anointing that kings were made and kings were designated. And kings were designated to open the connection with the divine, to be the divine kings, the divine anointed ones. Then that tells us about the huge power and the significance of her act, right? She was anointing Jesus into becoming the king, right? So who was she to do that, right? She must have had huge power as well, and a huge status that comes with that. So definitely not a prostitute. She is also constantly mentioned to be following Jesus, right? She was the first one to whom he appeared after his resurrection. So again, I think for me at least, that really winks at a very high status woman with a very deep and profound connection, very intimate connection with Jesus. But I would love for us to go a little bit deeper also on anointing and to understand that there is in fact a very ancient lineage of priestesses called the Myrrhofores, who used to work with anointing oils and specifically myrrh, spikenard, and frankincense. And those three incenses and oils are believed to be the resins and the oils that were used in all ancient mystery schools for the rites of birth and death and rebirth, so resurrection. Okay. And so even like in ancient Egypt, they used to use a mix of myrrh and other incenses to mummify the pharaohs. So this is a very ancient knowledge and a very ancient lineage. And, you know, in their belief, the Myrrhofores, they didn't simply work with like the physical properties of the oil and like, you know, medicinal properties of it. They actually held the belief that each oil was kind of like their own spirit and entity, and each one had their own properties, and they would connect to the spirit and work with the spirit. So not just on the physical level, but also on the, you know, on the spiritual level. And myrrh was like the queen, high priestess of all oils, because myrrh is believed to be the guardian between dimensions. Myrrh is believed to be the guardian between a life and death, like holding this threshold. And so it's very interesting that Mary Magdalene was a Myrrhophore, and Mary Magdalene was working with those essential oils, and Mary Magdalene was there anointing Jesus and, you know, probably connecting him with the divine, so that he can open up himself and receive all these, you know, channelings that he had. And also she was the one at his resurrection in the tomb. And what's very interesting, I'll tell you more a little bit about Myrrhophores. So the Myrrhophores itself, the more Myrrhophore means myrrh-bearing women. And there's a lot of mentions of them also in the New Testament. Let me just check a little bit. So in Mark, in Gospel of Mark, it says that some women were watching the crucifixions from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary. In Gospel of Matthew, it says a similar account that Mary Magdalene and Mary were present at the crucifixion. The same thing in Luke. The Myrrhophores are described as those who followed Jesus from Galilee and saw where his body was laid after his crucifixion, which is very interesting. And then in John, it says later on, Joseph of Arimathea asked Ponce Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now, Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. So just to give you a context, like, again, if you think about the geopolitical context, at that time, it was unheard of to take the bodies, especially of, if they were considered criminals, to take their bodies away. They were thrown out. And so for them to go and ask Ponce Pilate for the body of Jesus, that shows that they were probably from a very wealthy, very high power, very high status family. And so that tells you a lot about Jesus and his lineage and Mary Magdalene and who they were, like, socioeconomically as well. And so for them to give the body back to them, right? But also what's very interesting is that after that, he was accompanied by, and this is all like I'm reading to you, it's in the Bible, okay? He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. And so 75 pounds of myrrh, just to tell you, the cost of myrrh at that time was higher than the cost of gold, right? So just to give you like an idea of how much wealth they had. And so why would you need so much myrrh, right? If it wasn't for, sacred rituals. And again, myrrh is the one that is used for sacred rituals of death and rebirth, for resurrection, for thousands of years in ancient mystery schools in Egypt, in Greece, in Mesopotamia. Like it's all very old lineage and traditions that were brought, but obviously not emphasized by the Roman Church. But definitely, I think this is just my interpretation. Again, like we don't have concrete proof of anything, but I really do believe that Mary Magdalene was highly trained priestess, consecrated to the divine feminine, to working with spirit, and she was hand in hand helping Jesus in this, huge shift of paradigms of, reuniting again the masculine and the feminine together and working together in this sacred union. And then, everything that happened, and her name was, and she was, diminished to a status of a prostitute, which is really, really sad because it highly affected our psyche for millennia, right? To have like this deterioration of the sacred feminine and of her, like of the bride of Jesus. So I would be really curious to know, again, for yourself, to take a moment and feel into all of this, to feel into what resonates, what doesn't resonate. Who do you think Mary Magdalene was? What do you think was her mission? For me, I presented you with some historical facts, with some, things we got from, the Bible, from the Gospels, from the Dead Sea Scrolls. But that's all we have. It's been a long time, and a lot of historical facts and a lot of historical evidence were erased, were wiped out, were burned, that we don't have access, so that there's just like one main history remains. Elizabeth, I'm so happy it resonates as truth with you. Yeah, it really resonates as truth with me as well. And so, before we finish this, and then later on, I'm going to go a little bit into the sacred sites around France, but I would love to invite you to read a little, to listen to a little passage that comes from, I'm gonna find this in my notes. It comes from one of the Gospels. It's called the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. That was found in Egypt amongst the other scrolls in like the less than 100 years ago. It's such a miracle that we found them. But I really, really believe that the sacred feminine energy is rising in the world, and we are going to uncover so many more things, and she's really going to come back powerfully in like the next years. I really feel her energy rising. And as women, we are also awakening to this. And my personal belief is that Mary Magdalene really comes to awaken us to reconnect to the other side of the Christic energy, because we have the Jesus in the Christic energy, but she's bringing the counterpart, the feminine counterpart, to really bring this equilibrium. And, her egregore is really calling us to work deeply within ourselves, to release any the wounding from the patriarchy and from the wounded masculine as well within ourselves. And the more we are going to connect deeper with our own sacred feminine, the more we are going to give ourselves permissions to go into our own intuition, into our own priestesshood, into our own oraclehood, because it comes with the feminine energy, right? We're all oracles, we're all deeply intuitive, but like maybe for a long time, because this energy was so repressed, we're like, no, you're not allowed. You're just supposed to follow this structured way. A lot of women don't allow themselves to go into that aspect of themselves. But the more we work with this archetypal energy of Mary Magdalene, the more we resurrect our own template within ourselves of this divine feminine, the more we embody this, the more we also going to give permission to the women around us to embody this, just because we embody that. And so somebody sees that, I'll be like, oh, wow, it's amazing. She gives herself permission to go there. I'm going to give myself permission too. And I think this is how we create the collective shift. And this is how we bring back the balance. It's by ourselves embodying this. And I think this is what her energy is coming forth and is inviting us to cultivate when we decide to work with her. And so I would love to read the little passage from that gospel. So in this gospel, it says that this is what Jesus said about her, about Mary Magdalene. He said, leave her be. She has anointed me for what I've come to do and done what she was appointed to do. Only from the truth I tell you, whenever they speak of me, what she has done would also be told in memory of her. You do not know or understand what she has done. I tell you this, when all have abandoned me, only she shall stand beside me like a tower built on a high hill and fortified, cannot fall, nor can it be hidden. From this day forth, she shall be known as Magdala, for she shall be as a tower for my flock, and time should soon come when her tower shall stand along by mine. This is so beautiful. And I think they really go hand in hand. You cannot talk about him without talking about her. And this is really, I really believe that this is the time where, the other facet comes up and her legacy is starting to emerge and her story is starting to be taught and spoken about and known. And so if you want to dive deeper into this, I would really recommend actually reading the other gospels that are not part of the canonical biblical texts, especially the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It's a very powerful one. And there's also the Gospel of Philip, which is really, really good. And there's a lot of mentions of them actually being together, being beloved. So yeah, like just go read that, go read alternative stories. And so I would love to share a little bit more with you, because I think France, what is so unique about France is that it is really believed that she fled to France after the crucifixion. And like I mentioned, in the geopolitical context, there was a lot of uprisings and there was a lot of instability in Palestine. And so there was a persecution of Jews and there was a mass exodus around like 60, 70 after Christ. And even before, there was a big exodus of Jews starting to fled. And a lot of them actually fled to France. And in France, and it's not something we actually hear so much about, depending where we are. Maybe if you're in France, you probably heard about it. But like, for example, me living in Canada, I have never heard about that until I started like receiving messages from Mary Magdalene, like, because I feel she's often the initiator into the feminine path. So she will come through and like grab our attention, be like, come, there is like this whole goddess called a goddess, path that is not told, but you can follow. And so this is how she came to me. And I was like, Mary Magdalene. And then when I moved to France, I'm like, oh my God, there are so many sites dedicated to her throughout France, so many, so much holding her history. And when you walk to those places and you go to those places, you're like, wow, there's like historical evidence of her being here. There's like historical artifacts there. Like, it's not just like an imagined thing, it becomes so much more concrete. And what's interesting is like often a lot of those sites are also sometimes built on ancient goddess sites, which is the same for her and for Mother Mary, because a lot of ancient goddess sites, it's like the way I say it is like the same energy, the same goddess energy, the same feminine principle just comes through different names, and it adapts in Christianity and adapts in whatever context it is in, but it's still the same lineage that just flows through history, through millennia. And so in France, some of the most known, I will try to share. How do you share the screen? Hold on. There is obviously the whole south of France is really imbued, and her energy is very, very present there. And so one of the most famous sites is actually the Saint-Baume grotto of Mary Magdalene. I have like a little picture. I don't know how to share it. Hold on. I'm like really not the most techy person. Okay, so there is her grotto. I don't know if I'll be. Can you see those? So here,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thanks. So this is in Saint-Baume in France. So this is a whole grotto that is so magical. It's up in a mountain, and I did a little pilgrimage there. It's around like Marseille area. And really, it is believed that this is where she first arrived. However, there's also some, stories that maybe he wasn't there, maybe he was in Narbonne, because Narbonne was like the biggest portuary city back in that time. So it would make sense that if she took a boat, she would arrive in Narbonne, but it doesn't matter. She arrived somewhere in the south of France. There is this grotto that is still now, a big pilgrimage space for people who want to come and, connect with Mary Magdalene. Then there is also another place. Actually, there is a church also that holds her skull, and we still can go and visit it. It's the, hold on, I'm going to see if I have a picture of it actually. It's also in the area, I think it's in Saint-Baume, if I'm not mistaken. There is like it looks maybe a little bit creepy, but like those are relics, right? So like it's believed to be her skull that you can still come and visit and pray to. And this tradition in Christianity to keep relics, it does come from much older traditions, from again ancient mystery schools, where it was believed that like actually the relics and the bones, they still hold the mystical properties and powers and energy, and so you can come and tap into that energy by connecting to the bones. And this is not something uniquely Christian. So this is very interesting. Another thing that the whole Languedoc actually area, there is also a lot of sites that are dedicated to her. And there is this, mystery stories. It's up to you to see what you believe. I don't know if we will ever have a concrete proof for this. But there are stories that Mary Magdalene, when she fled to France, she was actually pregnant. And some say she had, the Grail, the Holy Grail. There is a line of thought that the Holy Grail was actually, Saint Real, like holy blood. And so she was the Holy Grail, like our uterus are like grail shaped form. So she was the Holy Grail, and she still has, and like there's this, lineage of Mary and Jesus that is still continued. And there's like this whole, if you want to go deeper into this, like look into the Merovingian bloodline and, in the Merovingian mysteries. It is also believed that the Cathars I mentioned before, that before they were completely exterminated, like their last standing point was at Montségur. And it is believed that they were holding some kind of treasure, probably not material treasure, because in their faith, they did not believe in material possessions. So it would make no sense that they were escaping with like gold when they were about to get all exterminated. But there is a belief that 4 of them escaped and they had some kind of treasure. And so it could have been somebody from their lineage. It could have been some kind of original writings or teaching or something that came from Mary Magdalene. So there's a lot of mystery, and this is like the whole treasure hunt that like the south of France is like known for. There has been, apparently this has maybe have been transmitted to the Templars and maybe not. This whole site is like imbued in mysteries, and it's really fascinating. And so if you want to explore, there's also, hold on, I'll try to see. There's a lot of caves around the Languedoc that are believed that that's where Mary Magdalene actually came and she was transmitting her teachings. There is also, I'm gonna show you this wonderful place. I did a little pilgrimage there. It's in Rennes-le-Château. It's hot water spring wild water spring that has been there since like Roman times, and it is believed that Mary Magdalene was coming there to do baptisms. And so this is still a place that it's in Aude, and so it is still believed that this is a place where a lot of people come to do, to connect with Mary Magdalene, because it holds her energy and it holds her codes, and a lot of women come and connect with water. And water specifically, it's such a divine feminine element, because anywhere there is divine feminine energy, the water itself is connected to the feminine energy. And whenever we have places that are consecrated to the goddess, or to, like, later on with Christianity, they got Christianized, so they became saint something woman name, like Saint Mary, Saint Anne, and whatever, they always, most often, they're connected to some kind of water source. And so this is one of them in Rennes-le-Château, and actually we will be visiting them and doing some beautiful rituals there during the Sacred Feminine Retreat. Another magical place, hold on, let me share with you. There is also this one that is also believed that maybe she was doing rituals and baptisms there, because again, even the baptism, Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, but the ritual of baptism is not something inherently Christian. It is a very, very ancient ritual, again, in ancient mystery schools in Egypt and other traditions, associated with the death and rebirth. And so she was transmitting those traditions, and this is believed to be one of those places. And it's actually very interesting, because this water source is salty, so that's very cool. Again, let me see, how can I share with you? And this might be another place where we'll go. We'll see if we have time during the Sacred Feminine Retreat. There was one more place I wanted to share with you, two more places. So then there is the very famous Rennes-le-Château in Languedoc. There is like a whole mystery around this place. If it's like a rabbit hole, if you want to go in there, basically it is a tower, a place that is dedicated specifically to Mary Magdalene. It has like 22 steps, which is like 22 is her number, because today the 22nd is her feast day. It's actually also when they had the Crusades against the Cathars, it was, I think they began it on the July 22nd, which was her feast day. So it's very curious that they began it on that specific date. Basically, long story short, there was a priest who found some kind of scrolls when he came to be a priest in this in Rennes-le-Château. There was a very old Mary Magdalene church that is actually believed to be built on top of an old ancient Isis veneration site. And so it was dilapidated, and he wanted to renovate that. And when he opened the altar, he found some ancient scrolls, and nobody knows what was in there. What we know is that there was some kind of like family tree and something else, and we don't know what it is. But after that, he suddenly became incredibly rich, and he had like millions, what would be equivalent to millions of dollars. He was untouchable. The Vatican almost protected him. We don't know why. And he built this place specifically in veneration to Mary Magdalene, and he rebuilt the chapel. And the chapel itself, I'll show you a picture here. The chapel itself is very interesting because the altar is dedicated to Mary Magdalene. There is, if you want to see, like there is the big depiction of the Holy Grail, like there is like the Grail, right? Like a lot of wings. The saints he've put on the walls, if you connect them, they make an M and they spell Graal. So what does it mean? Nobody knows for sure. If you want to read on this, go read on this. There is so much information, so many mysteries, and so many theories, but it is a very interesting place. Okay, and we will also go there again with the Sacred Feminine Retreat to see. Because I do think it's very special. But there's another place right around that area where the famous Rennes-le-Château is. Around the Bucharest mountain, and the Bucharest mountain is also very mystical mountain by itself. There's a lot of geological anomalies. There has been anything. Like the people come there for healings. People come there and they say they have miraculous curations. People come there and they say they see aliens, they see elves. In 2012, there was like a whole flood of people who came there because they thought it was the end of the world, and the only people who would survive are the ones on this mountain. This mountain is really, really special and something. But what's very special is like next to this mountain, there is a very old lost chapel that nobody goes there. And from outside, you probably wouldn't even notice. But when you go inside, it's really beautiful because there is a chapel dedicated to Mary Magdalene, and there's a lot of mystical symbolism. Like if you look here, like the stars represent the goddess, the sacred feminine. It represents Venus because I don't know if you saw in some of my posts, like the planet of Venus, every 8 years, it creates this beautiful sacred geometry in its orbit around the Earth, and it looks like a rose. And so the rose was associated with the sacred feminine for like the longest time, and that's why it is the flower of Mary, and Mary Magdalene is often depicted with it because it's like a code word for the sacred feminine, for the divine feminine. And you know, if you again look at the context, for so long you would be killed for speaking against the Roman Church, and so we had to weave in the truth, and we had to weave in like the wings from the divine, the wings from like another story into the churches themselves, because that was the way to preserve the truth, knowing that it will never be destroyed because the Roman Church will never destroy its own churches. So how do you encode something? How do you keep a message? How do you pass a message without, you know, being seen? Well, you build it into the church, right? And so this specific church, like already it's filled with like stars and like little wings of the divine feminine. And if you look on the wall, there is the symbol of Mary Magdalene, the double M, the inverted M. There is the crown on top of her. And then if you look, it's almost completely gone. There is the tower with a star on top. And like I said, the tower is the symbol of the Mary Magdalene, right? This is her symbol. And the star on top is really a sign of the divine feminine and of the goddess. Because the star of Venus, right? Like what I was saying about the pattern. So yeah, it makes the rose, but inside the rose, there is a 5-starred, a 5-point star. So the star was always associated with the divine feminine and the goddess cults and the goddess tradition. So here's another picture of this. And so a lot of those mysteries are actually linked and into the churches. So if you go to churches, take note of the symbolism there. It's very, very powerful and very sacred. And so yeah, that's I think that's all I wanted to say. This is in the Languedoc area, so I wanted to share with you because we will be doing a lot of those pilgrimages and going to those sites during the Sacred Feminine Retreat in October. So if for those who are joining or here, it'll be really, really fun. But even in France, like notice in other churches, Nicole, like you probably are more up north, look, there must be a lot of sacred feminine wings in the churches there as well. So look for that too. And so that's about it for the workshop. I hope you learned a lot of stuff. Do you girls have any questions or something you would love to talk about or share?
I wanted to thank you. I apologize for arriving late. Somehow I couldn't find the link. I dug very hard and finally did. And I appreciate you sharing everything that you have been doing so far on social media, on your Instagram page, in your emails. I think this is some very compelling information, which definitely resonates with a lot of things that I've thought about in my lifetime and that have appealed to me. I don't tell this to everyone, but my daughter's second name is Ishtar because I believe this name has so much power and I couldn't get it out of my mind. I have tattoos on my back of the Ankh cross, of the Egyptian symbols.
Wow.
So to me, I cannot explain it, but I know for a fact that all throughout my life, I've had such affinity for so many things that now, with the story that you're telling me, it really makes sense. And this is why I am listening today and I'm here with you today. And I'm not sure if I can make the retreat. So far, I'm not able to with my schedule. But it doesn't change the fact that this is some very compelling evidence. And the fact that you are able to tie all this history together, I don't think it would be half as interesting if it didn't also mean something to me. I feel that and I can't explain it. And
Yeah.
you've been able to encapsulate it and explain it with some historical evidence that often rings in my mind. There's a little bell going off saying, that's right, that's right. So to me, I'm very avidly listening and just opening up to see what this brings in me. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for listening. And thank you for listening to your own soul call and go and explore this and dive deeper into this. Because I think, like, ultimately, we will never know for sure what happened. We will never know, right? It's more about, like, okay, what does resonate for me? What does speak to me? And, like, I love going and also looking a bit more at historical facts, because if not, it's just like everybody's channeled information. And as much as it could be profound and true, like, I love my historical facts, but it was also like taking it with a grain of salt, because all of the history is always written, for the winning side. So even our history is biased, but ultimately it's just about, like, following your own heart and, like, what does Mary Magdalene whisper to you, right? What is the sacred feminine whispering to you? And it can come to us through, like, it's like archetypal forces. They can come to us and activate different things in us, and they activate for different purposes. And maybe one archetype resonates more and another one comes later. And so the most important is, like, I believe, really to follow our own truth and to follow our path. And so thank you for doing that and showing up for her and for today. I really appreciate that. All right. So, Elizabeth, if you have any questions, I would love to hear also. If you don't, that's totally okay. I'm going to wait like a second to see if you have something to share. And you said, thank you, Natalia, so interesting. I'm really happy you enjoyed it as well. And well, okay, if you have no more questions, thank you so much for joining. And those who will be watching us on replay, thank you for watching it on replay. Please don't hesitate to send me if you guys have any questions afterwards. I'm here for you. And I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of the day. Bye, loves.
Thank you, Nat. Oh, before I forget, may I ask you, because you spoke about some really fascinating things, but I don't have all the words, like the kinds of incense. I know myrrh, but I don't know the other ones. Is there some kind of written support that you give, like, just so we can search those keywords and learn together with you? Something that's like visual or written, that'd be great.
That's a good question. I don't have anything written about them. Like, hold on, I'll write you in the chat box.
So the chat box, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Mary, like the queen of,
Yeah.
It's a resin actually, but you can also make mirror oil.
Correct.
Is spikenard oil. Spikenard is a plant that grows often more like in the Mediterranean region. Spikenard was the oil that was used to, like, Mary Magdalene used to anoint Jesus. Also, oh my God, I don't even know if I'm writing frankincense.
That's fine. I know frankincense, but I'd never heard of spikenard oil.
Spikenard oil.
That's awesome.
Yes, so there you go. I sent them to you. So if you want to go read more on them, you can also read the sacred art of anointing. I'm actually like I'm studying right now, like the art of anointing. And it's very interesting because, like, when you work with oils, you actually work with the subtle bodies and the energetic. And so each one of them connects differently and activates different properties. So I'm pretty sure that this is probably a part of what the mirror force were learning, but I guess.
Sorry, mirror force? Mirror.
Hold on, I'm going to send it to you in the
chat.
That's
an awesome word too. I learned that today. Thank you.
Mirror for. So mirror for it means like the bearer mirror. So you could you can go Google search like deeper on them and and it's really, really fascinating. What are Mary Magdalene?
Thank you. That's another workshop for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What are Mary Magdalene's key teachings? That is a very good question. We don't have that much information around her specific teachings. If you read her gospel, the Mary Magdalene gospel, it's very interesting because it is going like her, if you want key teaching from what I got from it, is that the sacred and the divine is within yourselves. There is no need for like an intermediary between you and the divine. And so a lot of those mysteries, it's about going within yourself. It's about connecting to your truth and dissipating a little bit the illusions that come from outside. There wasn't like a key teaching. Like if you think like, okay, what is the key teaching of Jesus? Like love, it's the same thing for Mary Magdalene. But if you want to like connect to what she was saying and like her own interpretation of things, I would really, really recommend if you go into yeah, exactly. Well, it needs to be suppressed. But of course it needs to be suppressed, because that's the thing, is that the Roman Catholic Church wanted to be the intermediary because that's how they get money, right? And so if you don't have the intermediary and all the truth is within yourself and all the love is within yourself and the connection to the divine, and it's about, unveiling this within yourself, then obviously that threatens the Roman Church. And yes, Elizabeth, that's exactly that. And power. Yes, absolutely, power. So I would really recommend you read actually her gospel. I don't know if I have it here with me. Let me check. I'll show them to you.
Nice to meet you, Elizabeth. Where are you joining us from?
And I'll just hello. Hi. Yeah, I'm joining you from Scotland.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm in the north of France, but I'm actually moving to the south. That's kind of why I can't do the workshop.
Right.
It's in the middle of everything, but my gosh, I'll be closer. So hopefully the next round, if I can.
I'm going to treat. I'm really, really excited. I'm just so really excited about it.
Just kind of.
All right, so I have this book. Like this one is in French, but like l'Évangile de Marie. It's like Mary's Evangel, like Mary's Gospel. It's a pretty good one. So like they found it in 1945 from the Nag Hammadi scrolls in Egypt. So this is like, obviously there is some, in this specific one, it's a translation. And there's like some of them you can find with like interpretation, what it might have meant. Some of the scrolls, like little pieces are missing, but it's very interesting to see because it's like, a different story. So there is a lot about like, going within yourself and connecting to your own divinity. And this is how you access the divine. So yeah, you can see how the church would not want those to be out, especially that it's a woman teaching. So anyways, so that being said.
So much makes sense because, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one last thought on power. I think Elizabeth's right. That's really the vein that we're touching on here. Women are taking back our power. And of course, this is threatening when you have wanted to centralize power in the hands of a few. And all of a sudden, people find out they don't need you, that they have it all within themselves, whether they're a woman or a man. Oh, we're going to be looking at a very different structure here. So I can understand that this
because the systems
has been hidden on purpose.
The systems and processes of power break down, and guess what we're seeing right now in the world?
It's exactly that. And I think this is like also the rise of the feminine, and why there is so many women actually feeling the call of Mary Magdalene right now as well. And like for me, like it's not just about Mary Magdalene. I think Mary Magdalene is like an archetypal power, and there is a lot of forms that the goddess takes. But I feel like even within the Christianity itself, which is like one of the biggest monotheistic religions, that like the whole West is like in some way, form or shape touched by Christianity, this is kind of like awakening and disassembling kind of inversions and false beliefs. And it's like she's helping us and activating us to like restructure our own inner beliefs and subconscious.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I've had a very exciting kind of like activation sort of signs from a Norse goddess, Freya, actually the last couple of days, which has been really fun. So this is all kind of timely.
you're like really called by the goddess. Now you're like, okay, stepping back into feminine power and opening yourself up to their teachings and their mysteries and their guidance. That's super powerful. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for sharing. It was such a pleasure to talk with both of you. And to those who will be joining us later, I hope you enjoyed too, and our beautiful conversation as well. I'm sure it will serve others because we all grow when we share. And so if you have no more questions, I'm going to let you go there. And, if ever something comes up after, like, do feel free to come back to me. And even if something came like, oh my God, I just thought of that, like, do write. I love to hear those stories. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, loves. Have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.